Have you ever wondered why end zones are decorated or how the spiral snap actually began? In 1927, the relocation of the goalpost sparked a design revolution on the gridiron, leading to some of the most unique field markings in history. Joining us today is the football historian Timothy P. Brown to reveal the fascinating story of A.W. Briggs' grid markings and how his brother H.R. Briggs changed the game forever by perfecting the spiral snap against the legends like Jim Thorpe. Let's dig into the archaeology of the game with footballarchaeology.com's Timothy Brown.
Hey there. Looking forward to chatting once again, and just want to remind you of what they used to say. It's fun to play at the YMCA training school in Springfield, Mass.
I don't remember that verse from the Village People.
Yeah, it's
the beginning of it.
There. You just, it's one of the cutout, EP kind of versions.
Yeah, we have smaller radio stations here in Erie, so maybe they just condensed the song a little bit.
Yeah, I grew up in a big city of Milwaukee, so we were on top of things there.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, we are poorly trying to allude into one of Tim's recent tidbits that he wrote, and this is a lot of words here. So A.W. Briggs, H.R. Briggs, the YMCA, and Jim Thorpe. Now that is quite an array of words there, Tim, and a lot of three different people, an institution that everybody in America is familiar with. How do these all connect in your story?
Well, I kind of alluded to this a lot in last week's episode, but so some tidbits and some of my favorite ones are things where, like, the storyline is one where it's kind of like a good Seinfeld episode where these seemingly unrelated topics and actions, you're going, where is he going with this? And then at the end, the golf balls and the wheels.
You were starting to make me nervous when you started talking about Seinfeld and your arms were moving. I thought you were going to start dancing like Elaine, and we can't have that on this program.
No. So anyways, this is one of those where it's kind of like it's so I wrote a tidbit quite some time ago about in 1927 when they put the goalposts on the end line. It was like almost universal. Everyone was concerned about how are people going to know where the goal line is, because everybody's so used to the goalposts designating the goal line that it was like, are people going to realize that you can score 10 yards in front of the goalposts? And I mean, it was like in all the papers, everybody was, stewing about this that whole summer. And so, a lot of schools developed solutions to try to figure out how do we distinguish the goal line now that the goalposts are 10 yards further back. And so one of the things that they did was there were a couple schools that put these little pieces of paper on it's like on popsicle sticks or something, that all along the goal line, they put these little paper markers to designate this is the goal line, right? More commonly, people put tackling dummies at the corner of the sideline and the goal line. They put flags there, pennants on long sticks, different designators like that, which today, that's where the pylon comes from, right? I mean, that's our pylon is a descendant of that kind of thinking. But probably the most common thing they did was to decorate the end zone. They started doing diagonal stripes in the end zone, or, down south, a couple different schools did the checkerboards, which are common today. I think Tennessee still does that. And there's probably a couple of others. So, but, it's one of those things that seems like you wouldn't think about it, but, decorated end zones result from the 1927 shift of the goalpost to the end line. Something you don't even, it doesn't make any sense to us now, but it made total sense to them at the time. So anyways, fairly recently, I came across a story about A.W. Briggs, who was the coach at Southwestern Normal, which then became Southwest Missouri State and is now Missouri State. And so he, like everybody else, was trying to figure out, well, how are we going to designate, where the goal line is? And his idea, which he implemented, was he created, I think it was 7 or 8, but anyways, he painted stripes running perpendicular to the goal line and between the goal line and the 5-yard line. He had a bunch of lines running perpendicular to the yard stripes and the goal line. And, he had been around back, when we had the checkerboard field. So, that probably, that made sense to him. So he did that at both ends of the field. And to my knowledge, no one else did, but that was his solution.
So this was in the field of play between the 5-yard and the
That's
goal
right.
line.
On the field of play. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's what he did. And so I'm like, okay, well, as I'm researching A.W. Briggs, I'm trying to figure out, who is this guy? Where does he come from? And it turns out that, I learned that he played, attended and played for what's now Springfield College, but at the time it was the YMCA training school. So it was the school where, if you wanted to be an athletic director type of person at YMCAs around the country, you went there. And then a lot of them went into coaching and teaching, physical education and stuff. But so he went there. So then
this is the same school where Amos Alonzo Stagg and Dr. James Naismith invented basketball.
Yeah.
And okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And they were one of the early forward passing innovator schools. They had a guy named McCurdy was their coach. And, he was, throwing the pass against Harvard, doing some, crazy stuff.
Let's take a break for a moment to tell you about a new product so that you can take and put your football knowledge that we feed you each and every day to the test. It is the Pigskin Trivia Drive on pigskindispatch.com. You're the quarterback. You call the shots, choose your play, grind it out with a run, pick up steady gains on a short pass, or risk it all with a long pass for a massive chunk of yardage. It isn't just a quiz, it's a march for glory. It's the Pigskin Trivia Drive. Remember, when the huddle's over, when you pick your play, the faster you answer, the more yards you gain. Hesitation is the enemy of the end zone. Keep those chains moving. Cross that yellow line to reset your downs and earn a critical audible. Stuck on a tough defensive look? Use those audibles to strip away 2 wrong answers and find your open receiver. Watch the play clock. You've got just 25 seconds to make the read. Take too long, and it's a 5-yard penalty for delay of game. It's game action. In this stadium, your brain is the engine, but the clock is the opponent. The mission is simple. Score as many touchdowns as possible in 5 minutes. And when the clock hits 0, your score hits the global leaderboard. Are you a bench warmer or a Hall of Famer? Step up to the line. Your drive starts now on pigskindispatch.com, the Trivia Drive. Don't let your football history knowledge go to waste. Try the Pigskin Trivia Drive on pigskindispatch.com. And now let's get back into our program.
So when I had read that, I was aware that there was a guy named Briggs who had played at YMCA, who was the guy who, best as I can tell, invented the spiral snap from center. So he played center for them, and he actually arrived there having developed that in high school in Salem, Massachusetts. So I'm like, okay, is there a relationship between A.W. Briggs, the guy in Missouri, and H.R. Briggs, the guy of the spiral snap? And so, I end up checking census records and whatnot and find out that A.W. is the older brother of H.R. So, and that makes sense, right? I mean, both of them to go there. So it's just kind of a neat connection. And so then I start looking into HR a little bit further. And in my searches, I find a picture of him in 1912. It's actually in the early forward passes, kind of a famous game. YMCA plays Carlisle, and YMCA ran passes from a spread formation, and they were throwing the P all over the field. But anyways, I found a picture of H.R. Briggs chasing down Jim Thorpe when they were playing one another. And so that's the only connection of Jim Thorpe to the rest of the story. But it was just cool to find, so I'm starting in Missouri, and then I find this guy's brother who's playing, and then I find this picture of the younger brother chasing down Jim Thorpe in a game in 1912. So that's kind of it. But
Yeah. He passed, Jim Thorpe passed through where AW's lines would have been had the field been lined with his thing.
yeah,
So quite
yeah.
a few times, so.
Carlisle won the game, but it was I think it was reasonably close. But anyways, just one of those bizarre things. It's like, when I'm researching this guy in 1927, who knew that Jim Thorpe would pop into the picture? But so that's the Seinfeld element to it.
Yeah, Thorpe was everywhere. That's for sure. And in all sports, he was quite the guy. Wow, that's an amazing connection. That people probably you might be the only one in the last century that would even probably remember that or know that there was a connection there. And I'm glad that you took the wherewithal to research it and then to share it with the world. Not only on your tidbit with us here in this episode tonight, because we would never appreciate what these guys did. The spiral snap, we take it for granted. Lines down near the end zone, we take it for granted. You wouldn't have Tennessee's probably checkerboard if it wasn't for some of the innovation or some of the other famous things. That the commercial where the guy misspells Chiefs in the Snickers commercial as a chef. Just some things we take for granted. But somebody had to.
Part of it was I had. It wasn't too long ago that I published a book about the early forward pass, and so I had spent a lot of time researching the YMCA school because they were pretty early innovators. And actually, the first book I found on dedicated to the forward pass is written by the guy who followed this McCurdy as the coach, a guy named Elmer Berry. But anyways, I was able to get a copy of that book. And so, but I was aware of Briggs before that, even, HR, but it's just kind of cool that these two guys end up being brothers. And
yeah, man, that's awesome. Well, as long as you brought it up, why don't you tell us a little bit about your book, where people can get it, a little bit more about what it's about, and give it some props.
Yes. So, I wrote How Football Became Football. And then I decided to kind of pursue like more targeted, that was kind of a broad survey of the game. I decided to pursue more targeted topics and just kind of dig into selected things. And so the most recent one is When Football Came to Pass. And it's basically the first decade of the forward pass, so it covers a little bit of the beforehand, how it came about, but it really concentrates on, the challenge of formulating how to throw the ball. I mean, they had no idea how to throw a forward pass, how to design plays to do something that had never been done before in football. So there was just a lot of technique and conceptual challenges to making that happen. And then the rules were just, there were a lot of bizarre rules early on that we can't even imagine, them being in place. And we'll talk about those in some future episodes. But anyways, it's one of those things where it was really a fun book to learn more about the early forward pass. And
it's a fun book to read and to learn about it too. So.
Well, hopefully the reader, I know the writer enjoyed it. It's up to the reader to tell me whether they enjoyed it or not. But
yeah, so how do people get their hands on one of your books?
So all my books are available on Amazon, and I know there's some people out there who don't like Amazon. So if you don't like Amazon, contact me directly and we can work it out, and I can send you a copy.
All right. Well, Tim, we really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your resources and your research and explaining, the antiquity of football and how it became the modern game that we love so much. And we'd love to talk to you again next week.
Well, I enjoy and appreciate the opportunity to talk about it here.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.